Sessions held in this room and in this building are governed by the Open Meetings Act, LB 898, and that is posted at the back of the room. At which point, I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to welcome our presenters and say thank you for coming. Please share with us, Mr. Gary, about the bike plan.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the time this afternoon. We realize that you have multiple things going on today and immediately after this meeting as well before we even get to the hearing tonight. So thank you for the time. We do have two briefings that we want to get to. We want to spend 30 minutes on each. That's the idea here. So we're going to go through the Lincoln Bike Plan. Jenny Young, our consultant on the project, is here to help us do that. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Kelly Van Bruggen, and she's going to give us a little overview of kind of the process that we're in right now before we get into the briefing part of it. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Ms. Van Bruggen.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So we just wanted to bring this to you today to give you some background on what we've been working on over the past year now in our comprehensive plan and the long-range transportation plan that were completed back in early 2017 or 18 when we adopted it. We had talked about developing an on-street bicycle facilities plan, and so this really spurred from those two documents. And so we've been working on a high-level planning assessment of the transportation network and how on-street bike facilities could fit within that, and we are bringing it forward as an amendment to both the long-range transportation plan and Chapter 10 of the comprehensive plan. The LRTP amendment will continue forward through our MPO process, and the comprehensive plan will come to City Council. So a little bit about where exactly we are. We went to Planning Commission on the 23rd with both comp plan and LRTP amendment, and both passed unanimously for that. And then we are presenting the comprehensive plan amendment at City Council for introduction on February 4th, and then having it open for a public hearing on February 11th. So we've asked Jenny to be here today to give a presentation on our process and how we got to where we are today. So I will turn it over to Jenny.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Welcome.
Thank you. So when we kicked off the bike plan process about a year ago, there were two really fundamental desires for developing the plan, and that was that the plan be very data-driven and that it take into consideration a lot of as much input from the community as we could. So as I walk through this presentation here today, I'm going to kind of focus on these two elements of the process being very data-driven and integrating the input from the community. So the process was guided by two committees. One was the Technical Advisory Committee, and that was a multidisciplinary staff committee that provided technical oversight of the plan development. And then the Bicycle Facilities Advisory Committee was a group of community representatives from a range of different interests around the community, from UNL representatives, the business community, employers, health organizations, bike advocates, shops. Benny represented the City Council on the Bicycle Facilities Advisory Committee, and that group met 4 times during the planning process and really provided, guided the plan recommendations and helped with getting the word out to the community and sort of spoke on behalf of the community for the plan. There was some research that was originally done out of Portland, Oregon, and then it was later translated to be more nationwide. And they were looking at kind of categorizing different people's tolerances and kind of attitudes towards bicycling. And what they've found is that about like 10 to 15% of the population are considered confident riders. They're either somewhat or highly confident riders, where they're willing to, ride on the streets and mix with some traffic. But the vast majority of people, 51 to 56% of people, are considered to be interested but concerned with bicycling. So their attitude is they want to be able to bike, but they feel some concern either related to their safety or their comfort. Maybe they want to be able to bike with their children, but they don't feel comfortable doing that today. So this research was really groundbreaking in kind of changing the way we think about bicycle planning and really focusing on if we can target these interested but concerned populations, these are the people that are most likely to change their behavior and actually get out and ride more if we provide a network that feels safe and comfortable for them. So if we can provide a bike network that is comfortable to them, then it would be comfortable to all folks who wish to ride their bicycles for either, whether it's for recreation, travel, health purposes. So the vision that we established for the bike plan, and this is included in I think you have the executive summary in front of you. The vision is that Lincoln will be a bicycle-friendly community where bicycling is safe and convenient for all and a common form of transportation and recreation. So that convenient for all really speaks to that, addressing all different ages and abilities of bicyclists. So supporting that vision, we have a series of goals, and these goals are really foundational to the plan. We developed these early on and vetted these through the public process, and then we've used these goals continually as we develop the network and as we prioritize projects. So some of these are maybe what you would expect. Safety, one thing that I would like to point out is that our goal around safety is to create a safe environment for all travel modes, not just for bicyclists. The idea is that we're creating and making recommendations that are going to enhance the overall safety of your street network for all users. Comfort, providing that low-stress experience for all ages and abilities. Culture is something that we talked about a lot throughout the planning process, and creating a culture of respect and responsibility for bicyclists and drivers, and everybody having respect for everybody else as human beings. Equity, giving equal access to different members of the community, a network that is connected and provides people access to the places that they wish to go. Increasing the ridership of bicycling for all different types of reasons, for whether it's for recreation or for commuting to work. Education, making sure that the community is well aware of the different travel options that are available to them and understand the rules of the road. A sustainable funding source and for both bicycle infrastructure and programs, creating travel options that support a compact and livable environment, and then finally being recognized as a gold level bicycle friendly community. So I'll hit on some of the community engagement activities that we did over the course of the last year. We used several different mechanisms to outreach to the community and to let them know what we were working on, and to encourage them to participate in the various public meetings and website engagement opportunities. We had an email distribution list we always saw a big uptick in activity on the website after we sent out an email blast, so that was very effective. We used the city's established social media platforms to get word out, posters, postcards. We had several different newspaper articles over the course of the planning process. Using kind of a multifaceted approach to getting the word out was definitely very effective. We had the project website, lincolnbikeplan.com, was updated regularly throughout the process, and we had various opportunities for folks to engage on the website. We had 2 surveys at 2 different phases in the planning process, and we had about 675 people respond to the combination of those 2 surveys. And then we also had a public commenting map. So this is a screen capture of one of the public commenting maps that we had. The first one we had early in the process, and we asked people you could just put a little pin in the map and say, this is where there's a problem, there's a barrier where this is where I'm not able to bike here, or I don't feel comfortable biking here, or I wish I could bike here. So we used it for that in the first round for people to tell us, where they wish they could go. And then later in the process, we had another one where we had the draft bike network, and we asked for people's comments, on the network. And the nice thing with this is that you could actually click on someone else's dot and see what they said, and then you could, agree or add on, or, provide a suggestion that went along with a problem that they identified. So we had over 650 location-specific comments, and this was really an invaluable tool for us in being able to create the bike network. We had 2 public meetings. One was at the Jane Snyder Trail Center, and one was at the Turbine Flats Gallery, and we had great participation at both. Lots of folks who stayed for a long time and were really engaged and, you know, rolling up their sleeves and helping with the recommendations of the plan. And then we had booths at various community events, the downtown plan events. We had a booth, the Lincoln Earth Day, some of the farmers markets. So an opportunity to engage folks who may not be inclined to come to a public meeting, but you know, may still be interested in the bike plan. So we were able to reach out to folks there.
How many attended your 2 public meetings?
I don't have the number off the top of my head, but I want to say each one was probably around 40 or so. Does that sound about right? After we did the first survey, what we found is that we had some demographic questions on the survey, and what we found is that we were getting a higher concentration of white men with higher incomes than was really representative of the community. So we decided to do a more concerted effort to reach out to a more diverse population of the community. So we partnered with the organizations and that you see on this slide, and they helped us with you know, handing out surveys and providing different opportunities for a more diverse population of the community to weigh in, and this was really successful. We were able to add on to the survey responses and get some more diversity that was more representative of the community as a whole. Okay, switching gears now onto the network development. One of the first kind of more data-driven things that we looked at was, you know, where in Lincoln might be the greatest demand for biking. And here now we're not looking at where is everybody biking today, because where people are biking today is typically where you have facilities. So we kind of took the facilities element out of it and said, you know, if the facilities were great everywhere, what areas would generate the highest level of, you know, where do people want to bike to, or what areas would generate a lot of bicycling activity. So we did a GIS analysis, and we looked at several different factors: population and employment density, using census data, where are there concentrations of households with 0 vehicles, StarTran bus stops, bike link stations, proximity to parks, trails, recreation centers, libraries, schools and universities, and then commercial zoning. So what we did, this example that the 2 images that you see is the population density and then the parks, trails, and recreation. And so we created a map for each of these and overlaid them all on top of each other, and then did a composite bike demand score. And this is what the composite map looks like. It's a heat map that shows those red areas are areas that are likely to generate the highest demand for bicycling. So this was really helpful, both in terms of informing the network. We wanted to make sure as we developed the network that we were having a higher density of network in the areas with higher demand. So like in the downtown area, the network has a density of about a bike facility about every 3 or 4 blocks. And then as you get outside, it transitions to more like a facility every mile as you get more toward the outer reaches of the city and then on the fringe. And this demand map was also useful when we prioritized the projects. So the concept of a bicycle level of traffic stress really pairs with that idea of tailoring a network to the interested but concerned population. The level of traffic stress for a bicyclist is kind of how much do you have to deal with cars on the road? You know, are you having to deal with a high volume of cars? Are the cars traveling really fast, and that makes you feel uncomfortable? So that is the highest stress experience. And then, you know, a trail, for example, would be a low stress experience where you're not having to interact with cars. And then there's this kind of scale in between a high and low stress experience where, you know, a local street, for example, might be, you know, very comfortable for you to ride and for you to ride with your children, even though though there's some interaction with cars, but there's not a lot of cars and it's lower travel speeds. So we did what we call a level of traffic stress, or LTS, analysis of your whole network, so your street network and your trail network today, to look at what those levels of stress are. And the good news is that you have a lot of low stress streets. Those are the light blue colors. That's because, you know, all of the local streets are, you know, by the nature of you know, them is a low stress experience, and you have an excellent trail system that is also low stress. So as we were developing the network, we're looking at this map to look at how can we overcome these high stress streets. Not only, you know, if you want to put a bike facility on a high stress street, you need to, you know, provide some separation from the cars, but there's also the consideration that you may need to cross a high stress street. So we're looking both along and across those high stress streets, and how can we connect the low stress network. So the bike network that's in this, it's on the center page of your executive summary. This shows the overall network of existing and proposed facilities, and this does show both on-street bike and trails, so you can see how the two are connected together. And so again, the community input, particularly the map, the commenting map tool on the website, was really critical for us to be able to develop this network. You know, as we were looking at different areas of the city, we would look at the comments that were made by the community to look at what connections, you know, people are really clamoring for, and then using the bicycle demand and the level of traffic stress analysis to be able to develop this network. So to give you some kind of overall numbers about the network, the network is comprised of 103 miles of existing bicycle facilities, and that includes a lot of bike routes that are already designated, some side paths or shared use paths, you know, with the wide sidewalks that are used for both bicyclists and pedestrians, as well as some of your existing bike lanes, like on 11th, 13th, 16th Vine, and of course the N Street cycle track as well. And then the bike network includes 140 miles of proposed facilities. So when you look at overall the network, the pie chart on the right, you can see that light gray and the green are the vast majority of the mileage of the system, and those are the light gray is side paths, so that's kind of a continuation of what you already have a lot of, you know, the nice shared use paths, and then the darker green color is the bike routes. So it's I think it's about 84% of the network would be those two facility types, and then the remainder would be a combination of bike lanes, buffered bike lanes, cycle tracks, or separated bike lanes, and bicycle boulevards.
Does the bike network include trails?
This particular, these stats do not include the trail network, no.
Thank you.
Only where it's a trail along a roadway. But then, this map does show all of the trails that are in their own alignment, because it was critical for us to make sure that the two connected.
Do you have an idea how much out of the total 103 miles are bike trails?
Yeah, so the trails are not included in that number, 103 miles. And do you know that number off the top of your head?
Well, you said when they run parallel.
Well,
Yes.
So side paths, so like along 70th or Old Cheney, where you have the wider side path that's trail width, those would be included in the side path mileage.
So do you know how much of the 103 miles is that? And I assume you'd have your trails along
yeah,
Capitol Parkway.
Yep, so it's about 45 miles or so of existing side paths that are a part of the network. Sorry, I misunderstood your question. I thought you were asking about separate trails. Okay, so in terms of implementation, we did go through a process to prioritize all of the projects. We identified 157 kind of discrete projects that would be needed to implement the full network. And those projects, of course, will be built over time, as funding is available. A lot of, as I mentioned, a lot of the network is comprised of lower cost solutions like the bike routes, where it's really pavement markings and signing to bring those projects to the standard and what is needed. And several of the projects in the near term and ultimately a lot of the projects will be able to be paired with rehabilitation projects and reconstruction projects. So, and then you really get, you can get the benefit of the bicycle facility at a very low incremental cost when you pair it with a street rehab project. So this image, which is also included in your executive summary, kind of gives the stats of the different types of projects that would be needed to implement the overall network. So it includes 11 miles of bicycle boulevards, and those you don't have any bicycle boulevards in Lincoln today, but the idea with a bicycle boulevard is to create a really nice neighborhood street that is, slow speed, comfortable for bicyclists, comfortable for pedestrians, comfortable to live on, and it really just brings the speeds to a manageable level where people are comfortable biking. It does include about 7.5 miles of road diets and about 11.5 miles of lane diets. So that's where you have, lanes that are wider than maybe is necessary, and you could, narrow the lanes just a touch to be able to accommodate a bike lane. We have the bike routes, the side paths that we talked about earlier, and then we do have 88 intersection enhancements, and those really kind of run the gamut from, adding simple crosswalks to pedestrian signals to grade separated crossings. So then, in addition to the network, we also have some program recommendations. And it really is multifaceted, and the two kind of overarching ideas behind the programs are to implement a safety campaign that targets specific unsafe behavior, both by bicyclists and drivers, and that really aims at education and enforcement programs around bicycling. And then the second one is to foster a culture of mutual respect and empathy. And this speaks to that goal that I pointed out earlier. In this one, the strategies are really about fostering a love of bicycling and encouraging people to bike, and also humanizing that these are people that are riding their bikes, and that these are your neighbors and your colleagues that are riding their bike. And then really making sure that everyone really understands the rules of the road and the etiquette for bicycling, and this goes to both bicyclists and drivers, and making sure everybody understands what those rules are. Finally, there's been a lot of research, particularly in recent years, on the benefits of investing in bicycle infrastructure. And the community and benefits really extend beyond just those who bike. So included in your executive summary and in the plan are some of the highlights of some of the great benefits of investing in bicycle infrastructure, and those range from environmental benefits, safety for all users of the street network, mobility, getting people out of their cars and onto bikes is beneficial for just being able to move people around the city. The economy, and one thing that we talked a lot about was this idea of, as the younger generation is really showing a preference for being able to walk and bike and have a livable community, so your ability to be able to attract and retain talent in Lincoln, I think that really falls under the economic piece. And then finally, health, having access to outdoor recreation opportunities, and the public health benefits associated with that. So the public review draft was available for about a 3-week period in November, and we did get a lot of feedback during that public review period. We had 119 comments received either by email, phone calls, on the website. And I put a couple quotes up here just to give you a little bit of a flavoring for some of the comments. One that I thought was kind of representative of the positive comments was somebody said, "Thank you for starting to make street connections throughout the city. Before this, we had to transport our bikes by vehicle to get to the trails, find our way through neighborhoods, or risk our lives on busy streets." And then one that I think is fairly representative of some of the negative comments that we got. This person said, "I would be all for the bike plan here in Lincoln if we had streets and roadways that weren't falling apart." So we did hear some comments about the cost of implementing the bike network. And then on the suggestions category, which was the bulk of the comments that we received, and actually the majority of those suggestions were specifically on Sheridan. We had originally identified a buffered bike lane where we would eliminate parking on Sheridan, and the neighborhood really coalesced and came forward strongly and said, we don't want to lose the parking. So one of the changes that we made in the final draft that you have in front of you is that we've reverted that to a bike route instead of the buffered bike lane, so the parking on Sheridan would be retained in response to that the outreach from the community. And then several of the other ideas that were brought forward to us were also incorporated into the bike network that you have in front of you now in the plan. So that is a kind of a quick overview of the plan.
And I think Councilman Christensen has a question for you.
So I was interested when you were talking about bringing the speed of cars down to a reasonable speed. Mm-hmm. What speed is that? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that it depends on the context of the street. There's not one magic speed that we want it to be on. It depends if it's a local street, a collector street, an arterial street. What would be, the tolerable? And we have to strike a balance between, moving automobiles and accommodating,
Sure.
Safely accommodating.
Well, through our neighborhoods now it's 25. Mm-hmm. Do you envision it being less than that?
Yeah, and 25 is that's a reasonable speed. So, that maybe we would look at 20 in some locations, but 25 is pretty standard.
How about accommodating schools? The commute that kids have to schools. Mm-hmm. Has this been addressed in this plan, that we're connecting schools?
Yep, that was one of the, as we were developing the network, we were looking at kind of these key destinations, and schools was one of them that we tried to always get, at least reasonably close to schools to make sure that kids have access to riding their bikes to school.
Other questions from the council? Councilman Camp.
Yeah, I had a couple. Could you elaborate? You said there was initially a high initial response from white affluent men. Mm-hmm. So.
Like me.
Damn, you had me fooled.
Check.
With our pay on city council, I don't know if we're affluent. I'm sorry. What?
Nicely done.
So when you say high initial response, can you put numbers behind that, like 100 responses and 80 were white men, or what?
Oh, it wasn't that high, and I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I want to say it was probably, I remember the men, it was probably about 70% men, which is pretty typical.
Out of how many would that equal? In numbers, how many would that be?
Well, for the first survey, we had about, we probably had about 300 responses initially. And then it was,
You're saying 210 of those were these white men?
Yes, I'm giving you rough numbers right now, and that was just the men. The white demographic was very high. That it was probably somewhere around 90-95% white, somewhere around that. And then it was definitely a more affluent, higher income population.
And what were the nature of the responses? favorable to the bike lanes, or what comments or whatever?
Yeah, so in that initial survey, we were more gauging the community's values and understanding, where they would like to bike. It was pretty open-ended questions and understanding what types of improvements they would like to see. When we asked, when we reached out to a more diverse audience, we saw some of the same responses, but one thing that we saw a little bit more was the need to be able to ride your bike to work from the lower income and more diverse population than we had seen, generally.
Okay. You had that one shot where it had all kind of like pins all over the routes and all. Could people vote for have more than one pin on there?
Yes. Oh, yes. It wasn't a vote. It was just you drop a pin and make a comment. So
Gotcha.
you could do as many.
So do you know how many people were behind all of those pins, those votes, or those that we call them pins?
We didn't ask people to write their name in the comment, because what we found is that people tend to not want to respond if they have to post, have their name posted on there. So instead of doing that, we did track by zip code, so that we could see that we had if we had a good geographic representation. So I don't know how many people were behind it, because we didn't track them by name.
Do you know how many pins you had?
There were 650.
Okay. And you don't know how many people made those?
I don't. No, we didn't track that.
Were they focusing on specific issues at an intersection, or a problem in an area, or they were just making a suggestion, would be great if we had more intersection controls right here? Or...
It was a combination of that. I would say it was mostly location specific, where they were saying, this is a problem, I would like to see this at this intersection, or, I can't get here. But then there were also some that were more general, just general wishes for, network connectivity and things like that.
You had that one comment that you shared with us that someone said, I like the idea, but something about cost, or I want other streets improved first.
Mm-hmm.
How did all of your reviews, surveys, and so forth involve financial costs? Did you have an overall cost that you could share, or?
We didn't.
I'm sure Mr. Hayden knew all this for us.
We didn't include an overall cost for the plan. We did include planning level costs, per mile cost for the different types of facilities. But since the plan will, be built over, many years, and, some of the projects are going to be built as a part of a rehabilitation project and so forth, it wasn't very meaningful to put together a total number for the overall network. So we're looking at it more on a, typical cost per mile. And then as these projects move into being implemented, the costs will need to be refined.
And no discussion of where the money would come from?
As we were prioritizing the project, so we did use the cost to determine the priority. So if you had two projects that were equal, and one was half the cost, and it probably had twice the priority of one that was more expensive. So we used it for prioritization.
If you had to peg the 140 miles cost to do those various bike lanes, buffered lanes, boulevards and everything, how much would that be, do you think, in today's dollars?
We could give that to you. We could get that.
You don't have that estimate?
Off the top of my head.
I mean, 5 million, 50 million, 500 million?
No. We'll get it to you.
Okay.
Councilman
Yes, Chris.
Eskridge, yes. That guy.
I've been called worse. Okay. So you do this in other places. And we like to see, or we like to compare grades, how we're doing with other communities. So how are we doing?
Well, I mean, this is just my kind of personal assessment of Lincoln. Your trail network is incredible, and you have the N Street cycle track is also just really a landmark, bicycle facility that a lot of cities that are your size or bigger have a lot of envy over your N Street cycle track. So I think you have this really strong foundation. I think, you know, the thing that's missing in Lincoln is the on-street bike lane connection. So, and that's what this will do. You know, what we heard a lot through the process is that, you know, I can use the trails for recreational opportunities, but I can't quite get to where I want to go, whether it's to a coffee shop or, you know, because then I get onto I have to go onto the street network. So.
And I notice that when I'm traveling in other places, I see, you know, places that I've been to a lot, and then I'll see new pavement and what used to be 4-lane roads are now 2 lanes with a bike lane on the side, and it's marked. And so is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
I want to jump in because the Lonely Planet recognized the city of Lincoln as it being one of the top 10 cities in the United States for their 130 miles of existing trail network. And I can tell you, I was in Tucson, and Tucson was one of the cities that had recently completed what they call the loop around Tucson, and it's incredible bike trails. And they have hosted their Tour de Tucson, and I happened to be there, and they bring in 7,500 people from outside Tucson that come and participate. Kind of like when we do our marathon, I think we're up to allowing 15,000 people to participate in our marathon. So for them, it was a phenomenal, way to attract more people to come and enjoy their trails. And the one thing about Tucson is that they have seniors who patrol the trails, and they make sure that everybody is enforcing good, respectful rules on the trail and not hot dogging or anything crazy like that, and being very respectful.
The words we used last time around, right?
That's right. Yeah, but I mean, they recognize that is a huge draw to their community, and certainly if we got recognized by Lonely Planet, which is the premier travel guide, that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
Other questions from the council?
Yeah.
Councilman
This is a difficult
Camp.
question, but we have, for example, several good, strong organizations favoring biking in the community, and I know those advocates and members are very good at turning out for meetings like this. Is there something of a silent majority that isn't coming forward, that just doesn't respond, and as a result tends to favor certain conclusions over others? A silent majority?
Yeah.
Or maybe not a majority, just a silent group.
Yeah, well, a couple things to address, and Kelly, maybe you have some things to add to that, but it is very easy to get bicycle advocates engaged in a plan like this. There's no question about that.
That's
they're
great.
excited, and they want to be, they want to participate, and we certainly experienced that. But Kelly did a really good job of putting together a bicycle facilities advisory committee that was not just advocates. It was really reaching out to a lot of different interests from the communities to make sure we didn't want to do this plan just for the bicycle advocates. We wanted to do this for the community. So we did have, representatives on that committee who, maybe were not overly supportive of the idea of, adding bike lanes, for example. And so, it is important to make sure that you are hearing those voices. And I would say that we have heard some opposition, and we have, heard, I think, probably a pretty good, voice of the community. Would you agree with that, Kelly?
Yeah, the surveys that we did throughout, we did get a portion that disagreed with the concept of on-street facilities and take the information back. We did hear overwhelmingly positive information too from the community, but this email list that we keep in our planning department is a wide array of people. So we would send that out every time we had some public involvement process. So I think that really helped drive. We did notice when we sent out the email blast that we would get kind of an uptick on the negative side of our responses. And so we certainly want to hear from all members of the community, because I think that only makes a stronger plan.
I know in 2003 I was on a downtown master plan committee, and there were 25 of us, and there were 4 advocates on bike lanes, and that was a precursor to getting 11th Street and the 11th and 14th, thank you, striped. And they just wouldn't take no for an answer, said you have to have this plus more in the future, and it just wore the rest of the people down. And so it's just trying to understand where the people are. I think if you ask people, I don't know what all you had on like the N Street bike lane, but there've been a lot of negative comments on that, how it's destroyed the street for vehicular traffic. People will avoid N Street at all costs now. And that's what I hear. They're not against biking, it's just the way you did it. I'm also interested in, Jenny, have you been to Indianapolis and seen their protected bike lane?
I haven't.
They just have stripes and the candlesticks or whatever.
Little plastic poles.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
otherwise, it's identical functionally. Well, it doesn't have all the, well, it didn't have all the recapture of drain water.
Yeah. Well, and I
It
think
costs
that's
probably $100,000 versus our $3.7 million.
right, and I think that is a really good point. I mean, you do have the Cadillac of a protected bike lane with N Street, but there are a lot of ways to do a protected bike lane at a much lower cost.
Maybe a transition, just because we're.
I know
I was
where,
going to say,
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Gary, thank you.
Really appreciate.
You're reading
the
my
other
mind.
questions. But one more comment to that, it's a good one. As Jenny was alluding to, the vast majority of the concepts that are in this plan are of that lower cost. I mean, there was a purposeful strategy there as we put this together because of that particular point. So the vast majority of these projects, if not the very large, I mean, extremely large majority, are going to be that lower cost paint on the pavement, signs, things like that. So.
I think the more buy-in you get from the community on this, the better it'll be and be received, and people will use it then. And I don't want to see that negativity rise. Okay, thank you.
So I'm going to say, just ceremoniously, are there any other questions from the council? Not accepting any questions from the council. And then, thank you both for coming forward, and we appreciate the plan. And it's a plan. It's an idea. It's a guidepost for moving forward. Nothing's getting. And there was another presentation today?
It's going to happen quickly.
Yes. Sorry, I was writing down my last comment. We do have another presentation today, and we're going to try to get through this as quickly as possible, obviously knowing that we have some other commitments today. Ken Boone is here from Olson Associates. He has been our lead consultant on this, and he will guide us through an overview of the project, very exciting project as well. Andrew Theroff from our office is going to give you an overview of kind of the process point that we're at right now.
Yeah, I'll be really quick. So just for where we're at right now with this project, it has two separate amendments. There's a comp plan amendment and then an LRTP amendment. January 23rd at Planning Commission, both the comp plan amendment and LRTP amendment were unanimously recommended for approval. The LRTP amendment is going on to the MPO starting this week. The comp plan
That's a
amendment
lot of
is
acronyms.
yeah. So we're focusing on the comp plan amendment here. So the comp plan amendment is going on to you, the City Council. The first reading is February 4th, and then the hearing would be February 11th. I have a handout here that has kind of a high-level summary of sub-area plan and corridor enhancement plan, but I'll hand it off to Ken to go over both plans with you.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here to talk to you about our project. We've been working on it for almost a year now, and this joint project between the RTSD and the City of Lincoln has really reached out to the community and tried to find a way to look at what is the future potential and possibility and create a vision for growth in Northeast Lincoln, and we're very proud of all of the hard work that went into that. So with that, I will get right into this. It's a little complicated in the way that there's multiple things going on here, and so I want to be sort of clear about those things. The three major components here are a transportation project that is really focused on safety. That the two at-grade rail crossings at 33rd and Adams are the two most dangerous at-grade rail crossings in the state of Nebraska, which is really the impetus for the project. And so, as they explored the idea of how do you remove those two crossings, the idea that this could actually be a catalyst project and looking at the future potential growth and all of the impacts that we could leverage from that kind of investment into the Northeast community. And so with that, a sub-area plan of the comprehensive plan was proposed. And that is when we talk about the sub-area plan, that's what we're talking about in the yellow boundary. In addition to that, certainly aesthetics and just how does it feel to be on Cornhusker Highway as a major gateway into the city? And are there enhancement possibilities to improve that corridor from an aesthetic standpoint? So we additionally study that area as well. On the transportation side, there's much work to be done as it moves forward. And in red, you see the full NEPA study area, in which that transportation-focused project will continue to move forward. So I wanted to talk a little bit about
What was the third area? I got transportation, aesthetics.
and the sub-area plan itself.
Oh, thank you.
You bet. So really, here's the major pieces of the study for the last year. Really, the technical analysis portion of this, a significant and robust public engagement process that we went to, an amazingly committed advisory group and technical committees that provided us with a sounding board for doing our work and getting in and making sure that this plan was reflective of their wants, needs, and desires. Those groups included business owners and community members, neighborhood groups, as well as agency folks as well. And so it was really a significant effort in getting them engaged. And then the creation of a series of a lot of concept plans to sort of figure out how we create the best solution here ultimately. So here's a summary of some of the engagement process that we engaged in. We had many in-person events. Another cornerstone to this whole process was also paying great attention to online engagement as well. We had a full project website that still is open. All of the things that happened and documented at our public meetings is also stored there because we know people sometimes don't want to or can't attend those meetings, and so that continues to be live. We had a public survey that was available through there as well as open commenting. So we wanted to make sure there was plenty of opportunity to in person have meaningful conversations about the potential changes, the opportunities that we could seize on, but also for them to indicate to us their concerns and things that needed to be mitigated throughout this entire process. So let's start with the sub-area plan piece, the area that was in yellow. And so the plan really focused on developing these strategies for addressing some very key components, from land use to development and redevelopment, transportation, infrastructure, connectivity, economic sustainability, and aesthetic enhancements. And so we created framework plans for each one of those broad topics so that we ultimately could bring them together and have one illustrative plan. Under each category, there is a series of recommendations for each one of those. So when we talk about land use, there are specific land use recommendations. When we talk about redevelopment and development opportunities, there's specific information about those as well, and so on and so forth. And so that, again, this is a framework plan that looks at all of these topics together for the future growth. So here is probably the most confusing map we have, which is our summary map. So when we take all of those layers and we sort of put them on top and we try to illustrate the complexity of this project, we come out with this plan. This plan shows us the future preferred option for transportation, solving the two at-grade intersections, and also looking at a way to move traffic more efficiently into downtown from east to west and then west to east, and then developing connection up to Superior to the north. And then looking at what those changes in the transportation system might create opportunities for development and redevelopment opportunities within now this reinvested corridor. And the other layer, obviously, is to what can we do to bolster and hold up existing business as well. This is a very large area. There's a lot of very complicated things that need to happen when you talk about these kind of improvements. We understand we are absolutely going to be impacting people, their businesses, and their properties. And much care has been taken to this point to understand those issues. As we move forward in the process, in the transportation project, much more discussion and understanding will occur in specific. We're not in specific here because we should really treat these as concepts. As the way we move forward into the idea of what could Northeast Lincoln look like. And so we get into the individual layers. Cornhusker is clearly a commercial and industrial sort of an employment powerhouse in the community. And we want to continue to encourage that, but we also want to encourage the development of some planned industrial, planned business park, and planned uses instead of it being individual lot by lot markets. So if we have to make infrastructure investments or transportation investments, that we have a way of planning those and leveraging them to the greatest extent we can. And so you see the majority of uses here are either mixed use or industrial or business park uses with highway commercial. Flood for Salt Creek was a major consideration for us as well, and so it was a part of the project from day one, and you can actually see in comparison to the land use map to the flood zones and the fill areas that the green areas that follow Salt Creek and also that follow Dead Man's Run are very respectful of providing for that flood storage and hopefully utilizing that space as an amenity as well for the community. And this area is lacking certainly in those amenities. We looked at development and redevelopment. We looked at the potential for redevelopment at certain nodes along the corridor. And also, again, we mentioned that promoting capitalizing on existing resources for redevelopment, green space, its location, et cetera, and then really incentivizing reinvestment within the sub-area so that we can encourage initial pioneers to reinvest, and then the market would take over after that. So as we look at what that might mean, keep in mind consider these sketches, right? These are just how do you visualize what some of that might mean as we look at what could happen along Cornhusker and the 33rd Street extension. Frontage retail, business and additional retail, office, industrial flex behind that, all sharing parking, all sharing access, so that you really can plan and manage those uses in a better way. And really get a highest and best use out of that land that right now doesn't tier very far back than just the frontage. And so this is just a concept of what some of that could look like. Another critical zone that we saw would be at between 33rd and State Fair Park Drive and the grain elevators and their existing operation and their impact. We think there's a real potential in the future that this area could be redeveloped and start to provide some higher density housing, some green space, some commercial and office and other things in a sort of very high priority connected node that would connect to many places within Northeast Lincoln and the rest of the community. And then as you extend 33rd north, it's Superior is running along the bottom. How you might tier some commercial and retail uses back into mixed use, into some density residential cores, and then to the south of this, it would be access to parks and other amenities along Salt Creek. So again, these are sketches and just ideas on how do we communicate what these things might be without getting into specific design. And then transportation, it's very important to discuss the transportation, closing the at-grade intersections at 33rd and Adams, and taking them up and over the railroad crossings, and then on the 33rd Street access, which is on the left, going over and then dropping back down to at-grade at Cornhusker, signalized intersection. That's where the extension for 33rd would go up to Superior. At the Adams Street, I'm so sorry about that.
Yeah, that's probably a good spot to say just a couple minutes more.
Okay, thank you. And then what has been called the fishhook for the Adams connection, which goes up and over and then comes back down around to a signalized intersection on Cornhusker as well. And again, and then in a long term, that there is an extension for Cornhusker that goes straight behind the grain elevators, and that we turn Cornhusker into that to a T location. And so that the movement that most people want to take, which is that blue movement down to downtown, would allow us to have that direct connection between the two. There is significant work that was done on incorporating connectivity from sidewalks, from PEDs to bikes and on-street facilities, at-grade or over-grade crossings, et cetera, in the plan as well. And then a look at aesthetics and quality of life issues within the boundary of the sub-area as well. We had a significant amount of economic sustainability recommendations and fully focused on business retention, diversifying transportation, and really continuing the employment corridor that this is, and really getting highest best use for reinvestment at key nodes and sites. Okay, so that's the sub-area plan. The corridor enhancement plan is really focused a lot on just the aesthetics of the plan and the potential. Are we done?
About 35 seconds.
Okay, so there's a significant amount of information in here. A lot of thought was done into within the right-of-way, but we clearly understand there are more steps that need to be taken as we look at outside of the right-of-way as well. And one of the major recommendations is design guidelines, and making sure that the effort that was spent on looking at what happens within the right-of-way of the road from enhancement also carries over to those properties to protect everybody's investment. So one of the major recommendations was the idea that we do need to have a design guideline for Cornhusker to protect that investment and make sure that it carries through.
How many pages is your PowerPoint?
Like 48, I think, maybe.
Definitely get that emailed to us, and then
You bet.
I'm sorry I didn't manage time better and we allowed too much time for the bike plan and not enough time for you, but
It's okay.
I apologize. We do have some other meetings to attend, and I appreciate you coming forward. I'm assuming you're available for questions. We always talked about that. And I'm going to do the ceremony. Are there other questions? Thank you very much. I declare this meeting adjourned.
Just as we're adjourning here, go ahead and go, but the